Hello, everyone. I think it's working. I hope it's working. We probably won't know if it's working, but yeah, welcome to this week's final episode of Flight Sim Weekly. Just going to give it a few seconds for the podcast just to start loading up on my end because I still don't know how to do anything technical. And Josh is just trying not to laugh at me in the background. It's yeah, let's just give it YouTube a few seconds just so it turns itself on. But yeah, it's just me this week. Nobody else wanted to host with me. It was really, really sad. And we are now just, yeah. I think this is why everyone on Twitch has a starting soon screen, isn't it? So they avoid this awkward talking at the start. And now we'll watch the link not work on YouTube. There you go. Right, you know what? Let's go with it. So welcome to this week's episode of Flight Sim Weekly. My name's Agent Squash, Alex, as you may know me. This week's episode is going to be the final episode of Flight Sim Weekly, I'm afraid to say. It's been last few weeks, it's been since we've lost Tom from the team, it's been really difficult to find a new host, and we can't find someone who can commit to it. As such, we are now going to change the direction of the podcast I make. There's a few new things that are going to be coming out very, very soon, but you'll have to make sure you're in the Discord server, which I've been told the link is broken. I will fix that before the stream finishes, or it will be in the podcast description as well if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. This week, though, we have our friend Josh from TFDi Design, whose face is now hidden because it's... I did change the link and then it's just decided it's not going to work. As I say, technical issues are always my thing, aren't they? They really, really are. On the actual live podcast, they currently can't see Josh, but now they can. You see?
Hello.
I can get everything working.
Good afternoon.
What? So, Josh, firstly, I'm saying hello like I've never spoken to you before, but we've known each other a long time, haven't we?
I think probably going back about 5 years or more now.
I think it's when I was an S2, which is...
You might have mentored me on Manchester Tower, to be honest, at some point.
We were talking about the one, the only London controller on East Midlands radar.
Yeah, it's far back.
It's been a long time, certainly. But you are now... Actually, why don't you tell us what your role is these days in TFDi?
So I originally started out, obviously, with Jetstream Radio, which was TFDi Design's sister company, as a show host before becoming eventually a station manager. That was just about 5 years ago, nearly now. A little bit of time passed, and then I found myself working support with TFDi Design, and eventually just moved all the way up. So I went from level 1 support to level 2, to the assistant manager to vice president just after Cosford 2019. And then here I am now with the parent company having a rebrand and becoming the chief operating officer. He said CEO there. That's not me.
Inverness.
Inverness, yes.
Yeah, I couldn't pronounce it right. That's shocking. So if you don't know who TFDi are, they make a lot of... Well, as I think it's fair to say, aircraft that are a bit more niche than what you see from other developers. So you've got aircraft like the 717. You're working on the MD-11. What makes TFDi go for those sort of planes? Because I'm guessing they're not the commercial big hits that like PMDG have with their 737 or FS Labs will have with their A320.
So the main thing for us when we decide what aircraft we want to do is what's not really been done before. So the 717, I wasn't there at the time of the 717 being created, and that was maybe started about 10 years ago now. So I was very, very small at the time, probably not even in secondary school when that was started. And it had never been done before. It was very special. Nobody had ever seen it before, and everyone kind of has seen the 717s flying around with like Hawaiian, Delta, Qantas, even Volotea that was in Europe as well at the time which sadly don't operate them anymore. And the same thing with the MD11 is that the last MD11 that was made was by PMDG a fair while back. So I think it was always something in the back of our minds. A lot of people asked us to make the MD11 because the 717 gauges are very similar anyway. And when everything culminates together, the MD11 seemed like a reasonable option because we've got the experience of making one aircraft, so we could have a go at making a second one. And it's fairly similar. I mean, nothing is being reused, and a lot of people think we're going to be reusing the displays. Everything is brand new that we're writing in for the MD11. I think that's one of the big ones. A lot of people wanted us to make an Embraer jet as well. That was another popular request, but we settled on the MD11.
Not just recycling the model and just putting a whole new model on it and recycling the entire system from an existing aircraft at least.
Yeah, so what we wanted to try and do something different because the 717, as we all know, was originally made for FSX and P3DV3. So the fact we managed to get to work on a 64-bit system without a massive overhaul, and again free for the users that had already bought it, that was already a struggle in itself, especially with the SLI flicker that came with the P3DV4 and 5, and the notorious bare view switch crash to desktop, which I think everyone knew about at the time. And with the differing types of model and the way that the graphic stuff was done, it was designed with the older systems in mind. So when we make the MD11, as we are now, we're making use of the newer technologies, trying something a little bit different, and just essentially overhauling the entire design and development process from the people working in the back end with the marketing images all the way through to the actual code itself.
What do you think is probably the most important thing to work on when you're working on developing an aircraft? Because obviously there are a lot of different things that you can, as a developer, focus on. What do you think is the most important thing to work on?
The main thing for us that we're trying to do is we want to try and make it as good of a replica as the systems as we possibly can. There's a lot of aircraft out there, and people like those detailed models. We were discussing it not too long ago. But people like the detailed models, they like realistic aircraft, and then we've got the people that want to better themselves flying, the pilots that want to practice in a simulator at home before they go into the real sim, and just for that all-round realistic flight sim experience. So for us, it's probably systems fidelity, shortly followed by the flight dynamics and everything like that. We want to try and make it as much of a real replica as we can. We've got a massive library of videos, pictures that we're using for reference. So even like underneath the MCP, we're looking at getting the cables in the right place and special things that are coming along the way that I can't quite discuss just yet.
Not yet, but I was almost going to get a sneak preview there, but
Almost.
One thing a lot of people are seeing now with the emergence of Microsoft Flight Simulators, a lot more casual players in the flight sim market, it's fair to say. And obviously, MSFS making a massive share of the market these days. What is TFDi's view on that?
So MSFS obviously came with its fair share of issues. I think we all know that one. I wouldn't really say issues as such. I think it was a case that there's still a lot of things that needed to be developed for developers to really kind of tap into the API, get into the SDK and things like that. And it's still being worked on. There are a lot of things in there. We've got people on the team that are somewhat experienced with Microsoft Flight Simulator development. So we're using them as kind of our reference. MSFS is, it looks good. It works really well. You've got all the realistic things without the need to buy loads of add-ons. And it generally performs quite well. On most systems, because it's designed to be a consumer product. P3D itself, there's an academic and a professional license. It's not really designed for the regular gamers that FSX kind of had before. So I think it really brought FSX essentially into the new market, and obviously it's different from the ESP platform, which just gives it an entire new lease of life. So we think there's a lot of potential in MSFS going forward, and we're seeing the developments come quite often. So I don't think it'd be too long before we start seeing the the big names in flight simulation start heading and getting their products in MSFS.
And on that note, XPlane recently this week released a preview of their new lighting engine and their next generation technology. Do TFDi think there's a chance that XPlane might come along into their future product platform?
Well, with Packex, we made that compatible with XPlane. Same thing with smart cars. We've got the MD11 that's coming out, and there's already an MD11 being developed for XPlane, so there'll be two that are very similar competing in the same market. And I think people are trying to target different things, and with the way that XPlane differs to P3D, It's not like FSUI PC or XPUI PC where you can change between the same thing that'll still pick up on the same simulator variables and the different environment variables within that. It's not quite the same. So it's a little bit more complex for aircraft development in terms of what we're used to. So it's a case of seeing how things progress. We can't rule it out at this stage, but we can't rule it in. We're still on the fence with that one. It might be something that we consider in the future, but it's probably not going to be considered with the MD-11 as of yet.
So, what do you think in terms of what can come next for the simulator platforms? What do you think is the feature that you guys as developers would like to see next?
I think that was quite a broad question because there's not really one particular thing that we'd like. I think the big one, especially for the consumers, is stability. I think is the only word that I can use. I think stable platforms, ones that can support various different add-ons. Look at things getting like the enhanced atmospherics and the VRAM usage down would be a great thing to look at in P3D V5 especially.
I mean, speaking myself, I use enhanced atmospherics all the time, but it is still unstable. And there are very little annoying glitches, like, you've got the blurry clouds and it all looks the same. Like, they've almost like half-baked the feature. And it's almost like a very...
I've seen the same thing. I know exactly what you mean. It's good. It looks good. You get all the, the volumetric lighting, the volumetric clouds. So it's not just your standard clouds. It's nice to have something a little bit different. It's not something that's been seen in P3D V4 because that was still using the same one, pretty much same stuff that FSX used. But it's nice to see that being brought into 2021 with a new look at some clouds and the different way that things are drawn in the simulator. And I think that's quite impressive, especially basing it on the old ESP platforms. It shows that there's a lot of time and effort being put into trying to modernize it, which is always great to see.
Indeed, because a lot of people are saying these days now, ever since the release of MSFS, P3D is now a legacy platform. That's what we've been hearing a lot from a lot of developers. What is TFDi view? Obviously, you're still developing the MD-11 for P3D, but do you feel it still has the room for growth in the future?
I think it does. P3D is obviously a lot different to MSFS. I mean, we all know that MSFS is mainly designed at the regular users, the people that just want to go in, have fun flying. And the VFR in Microsoft Flight Simulator is absolutely fantastic. There's, it's second to none. No matter what add-ons you've got, unless you've got like full-on ortho in XPlane, that it takes up a lot of storage space. Unless you've got that, Microsoft Flight Simulator is probably one of the best things for VFR flying. But if you are a commercial pilot, a lot of major airlines, even the US Air Force, I mean, it's done through Lockheed Martin for a reason. It's still very much a commercial trading platform, and they're going to continue, I'm sure, to update that to keep the customers that they've already got that are invested within that platform.
Because it's not like the sim has exactly tailed off. It's actually running a better backend with DirectX 12 than MSFS is using. Do you think it's more a case of we had so little options in the flight simulator community that P3D had to become the go-to, and MSFS is finally returning?
It's just standard competition between businesses. With the rise of MSFS, P3D, they had to come forward and kind of bring the product somewhat in line with everything else. It's just how the nature of it works. There's other flight trackers on the market. It's a case of bringing yourself out on top each time, releasing the updates when you can, and making sure you've got a platform that you can expand upon. And as we've seen with the many versions of P3D, there's definitely that room for expansion, which is always going to be beneficial, especially to people in the flight sim community. Because we all want new things. We all want to try something different.
And it's changed so much as a sim just since that first version of P3D.
Exactly. Yeah, I remember P3D V3, then moving to V4 and now to V5. The changes are phenomenal. I mean, I started out on FS98, so big changes since then.
FS98, eh?
Yeah.
What would you say your favourite change is since then?
Favorite change since then? Everything, really.
Just the fact that everything is a bit more real.
Yeah.
Indeed, I saw something on Reddit the other day that MSFS shared on their platforms about a comparison. I think it was FS95 compared to MSFS. It's interesting to see how, even though they are very, very, very different platforms, like you couldn't compare, they are night and day apart.
Yeah.
They still ultimately share a lot of the same things. a lot of the
I mean, it's the
same.
fact that at the time that was the leading flight simulator. I mean, it was designed for home simulation, and it was designed to run on the computer. And when you go back to 1995 and you look at a computer from 1995, you're talking that. I mean, my first memory stick, for example, was 128 megabytes. It was a PMY. It was about this big, like really, really big. And now I've got
Did it
a
have
1
RGB on it?
terabyte SSD. It did actually. Yeah, it had a blue LED in the middle. And now I've got like a 2 terabyte external hard drive that's about this big from SanDisk for the same size. And I've got a 128 gig memory stick these days. And it's tiny. Like I've got one that's tiny, that's 32. It's 128. So it's showing that as a reduction in storage size has come. I mean, I saw something earlier today as well. I think it was Seagate. They're looking at shipping 50 terabyte hard drives by 2026. And when you compare that to the standard of like 128 megabyte USB sticks, again, that like you say, it's night and day.
Well, I've got a 128 gigabyte USB stick that I just use, and that was 15 quid on Amazon. Like,
Yeah,
it's amazing.
It's cheap these days.
Honestly, I think it's time to get to the plane that everyone wants to talk about, the MD-11. So you're saying that the inspiration for the MD-11 came as a result of it being, again, a bit more of a niche aircraft. PMDG had abandoned it.
But the main, like you say, yeah, it was released a while back by PMDG, and they pretty much expressed an interest at not wanting to bring it to the newer platforms. And we had it in mind. I think it was I think we told the rest of the staff team in October 2019. I think it would have been about the time that we announced that we'd be probably working on the MD-11 soon. And last year, when PMDG made the announcement that they would discontinue the MD-11, like, and confirming that, I remember speaking to Colin. I was in a Discord call at the time, and I went to him. Oh, PMDG have just said that they're not working on the MD-11 anymore. Is it worth us mentioning that we want to start ours? And Colin was like, oh, really? So we started having a look around on the forums, reading through all the messages, and we could see that a lot of people wanted the MD-11. So we're like, there's already some, promotion behind it. There's already some momentum. Let's start thinking about announcing our MD-11. It was maybe 3 days after their announcement, that we announced that we started work on the MD-11, and the week after we got the developers in and briefed on what we were going to be looking at, and here we are showing full exterior model pictures and cockpit models. It is progressing really quickly, and it's great to see.
And it's going to integrate all those, as you were saying earlier, it's going to be a lot more stable as well, since it uses those newer development techniques. What are those, for those who aren't technically minded behind the scenes, what are some of those development techniques, and what advantages can they bring not only to you guys as developers, but to the end user as well?
So I'm not a programmer. I tend to work on the more back end things of the MD-11, but with my role, I do look over the Git commits that we use, making sure I can look over those, and I see all the development that goes on each day. I remember in the various workrooms and the conferences that we have. So it's mainly just making use of what's been added in the 64-bit platforms. So obviously we've got like the RAM usage, for example. It doesn't use just VRAM anymore, so you're not restricted to that 4 gigabytes. You can kind of use a little bit more, and obviously use the rest of the RAM as opposed to just the 4 gigabytes that was made virtually available. So when you balance that out, and you've got loads of different options that you can choose from, it allows us to expand it. So we've got things like the tablet OS in the 717, for example, is all just static pictures. Like there's no HTML, it's just layered pictures essentially within that section of the tablet, just drawn on the screen as you click. And then we're looking at the MD-11, bringing that out with, I think we've codenamed it as Tablet OS 2. Whether we call it something different or not, I don't know. But we'd be looking at integrating kind of like a web server, so maybe something like Electron, so like your basic package that you can run it within the sim and draw it on. And I think FS Labs have done a very similar thing with the fact that you can use it as a browser inside. You can get your network connectivity with your EFB that you can connect it on like a tablet, like I was saying to you earlier before we started. And it gives you so much more opportunity because you can use out of sim resources in the sim. So we can run that mini web server to host all of the MD-11 things that you can connect to via a port, for example. I think I've just lost you there, Alex. I can't actually hear you.
Oh, sorry, I do apologise. I think I was just going to say, though, it is a lot of things that happen now are because developers can finally do it. Yeah. And a lot of developers would have been hamstrung by ESP being stuck as a 32-bit platform.
Yeah,
And
there were a lot of limitations and restrictions in FSX.
And now that Lockheed has finally got ESP up to that level, obviously MSFS does not have those issues, but it has its own challenges that it poses. I think we have started to see, in the last few years especially, a lot more variety in aircraft.
Yeah.
Another well-famed TFDi product is Packex. So for those who've never used Packex before, would you be able to describe what it's like really easily?
So essentially, PAX it stands for passenger and crew experience. So we just shorten it to PAX, like passengers. And the whole point of PAX is to have almost like the feeling like you've got a virtual cabin sat behind you. So the pilot of the aircraft, they wouldn't be getting involved with doing the meal services. They wouldn't be in charge of doing the announcements. So it does all of that automatically. It gives you as the pilot the opportunity to do your own announcements and hear that fed back through. You've got the vocal recognition, which I don't think a little bit of an exclusive here. It's actually started out as a GTA 5 plugin, and that was like the basis of the vocal recognition. So if people are on the LSPDFR forums, you might actually be able to see it somewhere. If you have a look for something very similar. So that's where the idea came from, and the fact that obviously Colin had played around a little bit in the past with vocal recognition. So Paxes just gives you that opportunity to be the pilot and have a cabin behind you where you've got passengers that you might have, a seating issue that you need to deal with. You might have a medical emergency that you need to deal with. So it just adds the extra level of immersion and gives you the opportunity to almost like run a mini airline without the economy of that stuff.
Yeah.
With your customer announcements.
Yeah, so because you've got the career mode as well, haven't you? Which
yes, we do.
One thing a lot of people I've heard who use it, mainly because they use the FS Labs as well, and the FS Labs has some level of built-in announcements. Is there any plan to sort of work with other developers to integrate that in, to integrate it in with announcement systems that are potentially already in use in their add-ons to make that experience even more immersive?
So it all depends on various different levels. Obviously, there'd need to be an API to integrate with. The way that PAX works currently is it uses simulator variables that each airline can set, each aircraft can set. So things like quality wings, the PMDG, obviously the TFDi 717, they use the standard variables. So it's fairly easy to get in with those because they use like the common one. And the ones that don't integrate fully yet, we do have that partial assistance with it, so you won't get penalized for not putting the seatbelt sign on, for example, if the simulator doesn't pick it up. So you find that balance in the middle. It's just a case of finding out which variables are needed for which aircraft and going through the sim using FSUIPC to kind of break that down. In other ways, it's having time.
So there is potential for that further integration, but it just depends on what is accessible to you guys through FSUIPC.
Essentially, yeah. There's not much we can do unless it's exposed through FSUIPC, because that's how we integrate everything with the sim. Whether it be MSFS, P3D, or XPlane, it all uses the same style, I guess is the easiest way to describe it. And when that works together, you've got the multiple options that you can use, and hey presto, the cabin call button above your head opens the voice recognition.
I think those little immersive things, though, they really do help, and they make the experience a heck of a lot more exciting for anybody who's actually used it. Because I've used Packex before, and even when I get annoyed when Norman starts talking over, it's still a very immersive add-on. And is there anything feature in the pipeline to make it even more immersive?
Yes, there is. We have got a few items in the pipeline, not all of which I can discuss at the minute because we're looking at the next two versions of the add-on. And I think one that we're looking at, I think we announced this during our last dev stream, are world voice packs, essentially. So you might have someone from the UK that would record a voice pack, someone in Spain that would use they'd use Spanish and their native tongue to do the announcements. They might do it bilingually with both English and Spanish. So there'll be options for voice packs in the future. With the way that we do it now, a lot of people have asked for custom voice packs, and it's hard because of the way that we have the files set there remain ours, and they are essentially they're written in a way that can only be decoded by us and by our add-on. So it makes sure that there's no risk of piracy. It's all part of DRM, which obviously we can't discuss in too much detail these days with how things are. But it's essentially just making sure that the sounds remain ours and won't get ripped off for something else. I think that's quite important in this day and age with the digital world.
So we were discussing earlier before we went live about how there is, and this one thing we wanted to discuss is obviously we've got a lot of add-on. A lot of people are crying out for add-ons which are realistic. You can fly them. You feel like you're flying the real thing. Equally, and this is a very controversial topic within the flight sim community, we've seen add-ons like the Captain Sim 777, which a lot of people are happy to say, I've got a 777 model. I don't care. And actually, I was thinking back in the day, I remember when back in FS 2002, there was an A380 model I found, which used 777 instruments and little hacky things. And a lot of people, as long as they can fly the plane and it looks nice, are actually satisfied with that product. Do you think we're starting to move towards almost a two-tier aircraft market in the flight sims, particularly MSFS, where you've got those people who are crying for fidelity and some people just want it to look nice?
Yeah, I think you make a valid point there. Is as developers, we found that there's no pleasing everybody. Everyone wants something different. Everybody expects something different. So you've got the entry-level flight simmers that just want something that's easy to use, looks good, and makes them feel like a pilot. And then you've got the people that have been simming for 20 plus years that want something that's really high level, really technical, something to get the teeth into to learn. And I think a lot of the aircraft that are coming out on the market now, you've got to sit down and learn. But there are a couple of, like MSFS, their aircraft that they included, it's fairly easy to just pick them up and start flying, which is great for, especially for the entry level. And I think they're wanting to bring it out on console as well, which is perfect for people.
Yeah, they are
Xbox. Jump on.
Xbox.
Yeah, you want to jump on, you grab your controller, you can fly around with your mates for a bit in something that's, it's not like going in GTA and flying in like free roam or multiplayer. You got something that's much more high fidelity in relation to GTA.
Well,
So you can do something
I've
with
got
the
to say, last night, while I was slightly having a bit of fun, some of my friends had a go on the simulator I have. And I just loaded it up into MSFS, and it was just so easy for them to just start flying in a default plane.
Yeah.
Imagine if I loaded up in 717 even, or at the 737, or the A320. They wouldn't be able to do that. And they could say, I can see my house. It's sure it doesn't look most realistic, but it's there.
Yeah.
So do you think now that we are going to start with that division in the market, that add-on developers, because obviously for the last few years in P3D, I think it's fair to say, and XPlane as well, the push has always been make it more realistic. Make it more realistic. And now we're starting to see, as now I feel like we're starting to see as a community a lot more, it doesn't matter. It flies. Do you think that's more because we have more entry-level flight simmers into the community? Or do you think it's more as a change of shifting attitudes as a whole?
I think it's a little bit of both, to be honest. I think, if you want to fly around with your friends and you want to kind of muck around with each other, fly wing to wing, you're not going to be able to do that on VATSIM for a plethora of reasons. But if you jump into Microsoft Flight Simulator, you've got aircraft that are somewhat easy to fly to begin with. You've got a wide variety of models to choose from. So if you want to fly a 747 while your friend flies a Cirrus, you can. And it's having that balance, I think, is really important these days to ensure that everyone can experience something different. Like you say, there's almost, like you say, a division that started to form between the entry level and the experience. And I think there's something that needs to be in the middle. And I think with the way that Flight Sim Association started to market themselves, I think that'd be a really good bridging tool between entry level and learning to getting up to the high fidelity aircraft, the likes of PMDG, Quality Wings, things like that.
I think that's a fair point, because what I've noticed a lot flying online is there's almost like an attitude of people looking down on those who are just coming into the community and not really willing to help. A lot of people might not. I remember when I first started flying, I'm pretty sure you were similar. we just did it because it was fun. We didn't know what SOPs were, or we didn't know what anything was like that. We both started when we were young. That's what a lot of people did. And I think it's fair to say there has been a bit of a culture of elitism in the community almost at some point. Maybe present in certain organisations more than others.
Yeah.
But I think it's fair to say that some people are put off by the fact that it's so you have to go and sit down and read a manual for days to fly a plane.
See, I remember when I started, I used to fly in uncontrolled airspace. I didn't want to fly with a controller because I was scared of messing up. I wanted to get involved with the network. So when you fly to these smaller airports that have got less aircraft on the ground, I felt a lot more comfortable because if I made a mistake, I wouldn't be affecting anyone else. And that was my biggest anxiety, I guess, with being on, like, using VATSIM, for example, is I didn't want to be that person that, affected someone else's day. I just wanted to go about what I wanted to do, and I wanted everyone else to do the same. So I avoided the likes of Heathrow, Manchester, and flying to somewhere like Edinburgh. I think I remember doing a flight with Fly UK from like Edinburgh to Sunbury or something like that. It was completely uncontrolled. I think there might have been Gatwick, Edinburgh ground on, not Gatwick. And it was a case of trying. So I'd heard like live ATC. I'd been watching live streams, so I had that foundation understanding before I then connected. And I think with the introduction,
so I was a bit of a
T0,
numpty, and I started straight on Gatwick when I first. I'd been flying with default FSX, so FS 2002 ATC, which is even worse than FSX ATC.
Yeah, it's a big change.
It is a massive change. I think it's fair to say now we see a lot more people who just go straight for it.
Yeah.
Like flying in general.
I would say to the people that are wanting to get involved in VATSIM, try it somewhere quieter first, where the controller's got more time and patience. So I think, you control Heathrow, Alex, and I've controlled Heathrow a fair few times. And I think when you have newer pilots that don't particularly understand it, it does increase the workload of the controller, and it's not necessarily a horrible thing. But when I'm really busy with 14, 15 aircraft taxiing, especially during an event, it does make it that little bit more stressful having to help someone out at the same time that doesn't understand it, whereas the other 15 aircraft do. So I would urge everyone to kind of read through the different documents first, try and have that understanding, watch YouTube videos. It's a great air traffic control streams are fantastic at the tower level. If you can fly, like I think it was Gunnar that was talking about it last night on Jetstream, he's like, as long as you can fly a heading, a speed, and an altitude, you'll be fine. The controllers can do the rest. I think that's really important. As long as you know the basic functions of your aircraft, so the FMC, speeds, headings, and altitudes, you'll be fine.
On that note, a lot of people are sort of going in now thinking, what is the future coming out for? And we've actually got a question from Lewis Globespan saying, yeah, you guys have already said there's no MB11. There's nothing planned after as of yet to be said publicly. But what would you like to personally see developed after?
Oh, so I want to be careful what I say here, because if I say something, everyone's going to be like, oh, TFDi are doing this aircraft.
Yeah.
But a lot of people were saying about the Embraer E-jets, and I really like that idea because there aren't really any high-fidelity aircraft. They're mainly, your 2D panels or in XPlane. So I guess that'd be quite nice to see, because I've flown on Embraer with Flybe before out of Southampton.
I have too.
They are really nice aircraft.
Did you fly out to Manchester by any chance?
I did.
That was my first flight, Flybe to Manchester.
My first flight was Manchester to Exeter. That was my first one. Flown to the UK a few times, then to Southampton. But I'd like to see an Embraer E-jet done, whether that's by us or another developer. I think that's a really good open market, especially with Flybe potentially making that return. We've all seen the little news stories coming out. I think it'd be interesting to get some regional E-jets. There's not many of those.
Another thing that's, well, it used to be under the TFDi umbrella, but now the parent company has been renamed to Invernex, is Jetstream Radio. And Jetstream Radio at the moment, as we record this now live, what is Jetstream doing this weekend, in fact?
So what we do is, it's normally every year. We haven't done it for a couple of years, but we do the Listener Choice Awards. And it's where we essentially make a Google form and share that Google form out and ask people to vote for their favourites. So we've got different categories this year of favorite on-air personality, favorite regular show, everything like that. And it just gives our DJs a chance to promote themselves and to see what people think. And it's great to see that the votes, like we haven't announced this yet, but the votes are an accurate reflection of the interaction that we see with the hosts. So it's really important for us as, station managers and running the station each day to see what the listeners like. And it also gives us the opportunity to put on an event, get some giveaways and get the listeners involved. And that's exactly what we've done this weekend. We've got a load of giveaways that have been going on for the past 42 hours at this point. We'll be finishing at midnight tonight. So that's what we're doing, a live on-air 48-hour marathon where we've got the majority of our show host team hosting at least 2-hour slots this weekend, and hopefully producing a really good weekend of fun that you don't really get to experience on the radio very often, especially in this niche community that we're in.
Do you think it's important that we promote platform? Well, actually, I'll sort of rephrase that a little bit because, of course, it's important that you promote it. But do you think these sort of tools, like not just Jetstream but also Twitch, do you think it's important as we as a community to come around those things so we can overall increase ourselves as a community, if you will? That's a really poor phrasing, but I think you understand what I mean, hopefully.
Yeah, I think it is very important that there's a sense of community because, yes, you've got the likes of VATSIM, you've got IVAO that are your virtual flying networks and communities that people get involved in. But it's nice to have something that's not related just to online flying. Like, I released a mobile app a couple of months ago that's on the iOS store. And from going from being Smart Cars Radio that it initially was to having its own standalone website and then standing on its own 2 feet 7 years later with us under our management, I think it's just crazy that there's actually a market for internet radio. Because a lot of people think that radio as a whole is dying with the likes of Spotify, but you don't get that interaction with a person like you do on the radio. And one of the things that we pride ourselves on at Jetstream is getting those DJs to interact with the community, because if it wasn't for the community, we wouldn't have a radio station. So it's important for us to look after the people that made us who we are, that we can interact with. And again, like I said earlier, the event that we're doing this weekend with all the giveaways, again, that's just a way to get our community involved with our event and to make them feel a value part of the community, which is really important for us.
Well, thank you so much, Josh. I'm aware you've been up for a long time today.
I
have. So I think it's fair to say that now this is actually the final episode of Flight Sim Weekly. And hopefully, in the future, we are going to be announcing some very, very exciting things. Because I've enjoyed doing the podcast, but unfortunately, the way we have it at the moment is not going to make it work in the future. But hopefully, in the future, we can have something brand new, something better, more fun, more engaging, and that more information about that will come soon. So it's going to be a shorter episode today because to be honest, I'm still hammered.
I can tell. You're very talkative.
No, I remember I used to be so quiet back in the day.
You did.
And now,
you were very quiet, very timid, and you wouldn't really talk to many people. And I look at you, just don't stop talking these days.
Oh my god! I think that's just me. I think that's just me on Twitch, to be honest. Yeah. But from everyone who's taken part on the Flight Sim Weekly team, whether they're no longer working with us or they've helped out at all, thank you so much for watching. There will be something soon that will be bigger, better. It doesn't need 2 hosts. But thank you so much, and we will see you again soon.
Ta-ra.